This is Unit 2, Lesson 2 of the History Units, and the title of this lesson is the Cuban Missile Crisis. This lesson is really an introduction to the topic of the Cuban Missile Crisis, and students will be reading many more documents as they go through this unit. In this lesson, they're going to be doing some analysis, and they're going to analyze a photograph, a political cartoon, and then 2 quotes as an introduction to this topic. So at this point, I expect that they will not have background knowledge. What this activity should do is get them interested enough in the topic to find out more about it. So what you want to do is resist telling students about the event. Provide them with only enough background information to make the activities doable. Remember, at this point, their observations don't need to reflect knowledge of the event. They don't need to be absolutely accurate. What you're trying to do is build interest. So you are going to let them know that there was a conflict between the United States and the USSR, but you're not going to let them know all the details. So the first thing they're going to do is they're going to think about the type of document and the way historians think about these types of documents by discussing the trustworthiness of them. So students are going to be looking at a photograph, but they're also going to be thinking about a memoir, an audio taped account of an event, a painting of a battlefield, and another historian's account. And they'll use these different things to analyze how trustworthy, what affordances and limitations each of these sources might bring. And the sources are things that historians actually do use, so it's an interesting conversation to have with students. They're also in Activity 1 going to review the techniques historians use to analyze photographs and political cartoons. They have had some of this in Unit 1 if they have done Unit 1. If they have not, then this will be fairly new information for them, although they did some of it in the first lesson. So as I said, if your students have completed Unit 1 already, these techniques only need to be reviewed. If not, you're going to have to teach them, which means you will take a document and you will model the process with them, and then you will guide students through the process as a whole class before letting them do some independent practice and give them feedback. So what are students going to do in Activity 2? They're going to be doing the actual analysis. There is a photograph, a political cartoon, and 2 quotes. The photograph is a fairly famous one. It depicts Nikita Khrushchev in 1960 addressing the United Nations. So he's at a podium and he has a shoe in his hand. Looks like he's banging the shoe and shouting. The political cartoon is another famous one. It shows President Kennedy and Nikita Khrushchev sitting at a table. They are both, for their chairs, they're sitting on missiles, and they are engaged in an arm wrestle. What this says on it is, okay, Mr. President, let's talk. And we know a little bit about the context. This was, the actual cartoon was created by a Welsh-born cartoonist, Leslie Gilbert Illingworth, and they are sitting on hydrogen bombs that appeared on October 29th, 1962. So that's where that was. And then there are 2 quotes. The 2 quotes are very short. The first one is Nikita Khrushchev from November 18th, 1956. And in this quote, he says, "If you don't like us, don't accept our invitations, and don't invite us to come to see you. Whether you like it or not, history is on our side. We will bury you." The second one is Nikita Khrushchev again. This one is July 24th, 1959. So 3 years later, and he says, America has been in existence for 150 years, and this is the level she has reached. We have existed not quite 42 years, and in another 7 years we will be on the same level as America. When we catch up, in passing you, we will wave to you. So that's what the students are going to be looking at and analyzing. So they're going to be using some techniques that they may have already used in Unit 1 if they participated in that. For the photograph and cartoon, we're going to use the National Archives method and methods. And for the cartoon, we're going to use a photographic analysis guide as well. And for the quotes, they're going to be answering some questions about them. So one of the things you need to know about this photograph, the photograph of Nikita Khrushchev holding the shoe, is that it is a fake. But don't tell students that until they've analyzed it and the cartoon along with it. This will be important because you want that element of surprise when they find out that that photograph really wasn't a truthful photograph, not an accurate photograph, and that will get them thinking a little bit more about the role of photographs in historiography. So notice that with the photograph and the cartoon, there are dates and some contextual information, and also in the quotes. So what you want them to be looking, make sure they look at the dates and the context, and think about that when they're trying to do some analysis of these things. Also, they should notice a difference in tone. For instance, in the first quote, Khrushchev is saying, "We will bury you," and in the second quote, he is saying, "We will wave to you." Well, what is the difference in tone between those two things, and what might have occurred in the meantime between 1956 and 1959 that might have caused this change in attitude? One of the things that you know, but again, you do not want to tell students right away, is that during this period of time, the USSR actually was the first to launch a man in a spacecraft. So that's one thing that you will need to know. In the third activity, they're going to be thinking about what these sources say about the theme of liberty during the 1960s. In the third activity, students are going to be thinking about what the sources say about the theme of liberty during the 1960s. Hopefully they will come to some sort of conclusion about people being in the United States being worried about their liberties and freedom because of the threats of the Soviet Union. So what you're asking students to do is to do a free response. So they're going to be writing a free response. You want to give students time to write down their thoughts, probably about 5 minutes, discuss with a partner or in a small group, and then get some of their ideas on the table with the whole group. They don't have much data, so they're going to be speculating. They can revise these speculations later on if necessary, and you'll need to make that clear. So tell them that they don't have to have right answers. What they're doing is they're thinking about their that they're making some tentative hypotheses about this. And you can ask, what else would you need to know for you to be more sure of your answer to that question? The whole unit is actually about the thoughts of liberty, about liberty and freedom. So they'll get plenty of opportunities to reflect on those ideas. So as in Lesson 1, students are going to be reviewing the meanings of sourcing, contextualization, and primary sources because they are using primary source documents in this lesson, and they are looking at the context and they're thinking about the source of information. So you want students to discuss again how they use these tools in this lesson. This is a review, especially if students have participated in Unit 1. They should know what these are, but to think about how they're used in a particular situation is the new kind of thing that you're doing with them. So that's the end of this lesson. This should be an actually fun lesson for students because there are a lot of interesting things to discuss about the photograph and the political cartoon and the quotes. So have a good time with it.